Doug MacLean needs no introduction, but for your sake, I'll do it anyways. His Wikipedia says a Canadian sportscaster working for Rogers Media Sportsnet, former ice hockey coach and general manager. I love how they say ice hockey. Former president, general manager, and head coach of the NHL's Columbus Blue Jackets, and was also the head coach of the Florida Panthers from Summerside, PEI. There he is. We're bringing him in. How you doing, Coach? You're looking fantastic, by the way.
Well, I think I'm a little bit like you. I get a little of that Florida living. Oh, it helps a little. But PEI, Florida, good combination.
Is it ever? Hey, do you want to know how your name came up? I was at Bill Lindsay's house yesterday, and we were talking about his favorite coaches. He said, Doug MacLean, and he goes, and I got to say Roger Nielsen, because Roger kept me on the team. He goes, I thought I was going to get cut. And he says, I need somebody to keep my boat. And Bill goes, I let him dock it at my boat slip, and that's why I made the team. Man, those were good times, eh, Doug?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. I was talking about it today. Did Gord Stellick's XM NHL show today, and we were talking about the Panthers, in the interview. And, it is amazing, that whole group of guys, how well they've done. They were good players. They were character guys, but you look at all of them as people and what they've done since they've retired and moved on. There's not a guy that hasn't done really well from that group. It just tells you of what they were made of. They were a special group. And I remember, Billy Lindsay and Tommy Fitz, whoever I put those guys with, they were the best line and the hardest working line and the physical line. And they were good people for sure.
Well, and they were hoping to finish it off with a Stanley Cup win last year. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
At least they got a win in the Stanley Cup final for the first time, because you know what happened in 1996. But do you ever get back down here much, Doug, at all?
I live in Delray Beach, so I'm pretty well. We'll go down the next week to head to Delray. Get there mid-October, and we stay 7 months in Delray. We're U.S. residents, so we'll spend all winter, and we'll usually come back to PEI, mid-May or so. So we spend a lot of time in Delray. I don't get down to many games. I watch them, but I don't go down to very many unless there's somebody on a visiting team I want to, get together with. So I don't see a whole lot, but I watch them play pretty regular. I mean, seriously though.
Well,
I coached in '96.
Yeah.
Okay. And Maurice ties me for the most playoff wins. Like, that's Gretzky-ish record holding. Like, come on. Somebody's got to beat that record. It's a joke.
Huge gap in between. Huge gap in between. But I will say this.
25 years.
We do special occasion shows at the beach house in Pompano Beach. I'm sure you know where it is. Randy Moeller was just saying the other day, when's your next show at the beach house? So we'll get you guys all together and we'll do a special show there, bringing everybody together. It would be great. Yeah. Look, if you don't mind, if you were talking to Stellick about the Panthers, what do you expect out of them? And for that matter, the Cross-State Lightning, because there's a lot more hockey talk here than people would think. They're wondering what they're going to get out of their teams this year.
I'm seeing a little arrogance out of Tampa Bay that I don't really like, and Vasilevsky being injured, and they're becoming thin because of cap issues, So it's and some tough injuries with Vasilevsky going down here now, and losing some important depth guys. Killorn was a big loss this summer, so I see Tampa Bay potentially dropping off a little bit. The Panthers, it all comes down for me to Bobrovsky. Spencer Knight, hopefully he comes back and is good and able to become the player they all envision him becoming. But if their goaltending was so bad during the regular season and so good in the playoffs that it was like two different teams. So if Bobrovsky can do it consistently, I really like their team. Look, Montour's a big loss to start. Ekblad's a big loss to start. But I like their team a lot. So it'll be fun to watch again, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about your book first and then bring it back to this year's NHL. What do you got? What's the latest?
The latest on the book? It's a bestseller, man. Indigo
of course.
Bestseller, yes. Me and Elon Musk on the shelf, No, you know what? The book was, it's funny, Simon & Schuster called me just after I left Sportsnet and said, we'd like to do a book. And I said, I really don't want to do a book, And they said, well, it's more like we'd like to do like a Moneyball of hockey type of book and about the draft. And I said, oh, well, that kind of intrigues me. So I hooked up with Scott Morrison, who's just a wonderful friend and a writer, guy that's written a ton of books. So we worked together. We did 3 years of it. And, it's all about the draft, my experiences with the draft, but also great draft stories. We did a chapter on the Lindros deal, which is fascinating. Pierre Paget, who's a friend of mine, lives in Austria. He kept every detailed interview he had with teams and who they offered. I think it's a great chapter. We did a chapter on analytics, which was really interesting because no GMs would let me use their name except for Rick Dudley. They'd say, hey, Doug, we'll talk to you about. I talked to 30 coaches, GMs, and they said, Doug, we'll talk to you. We'll tell you what we're doing. But please do not use my name because my owner is very sensitive about analytics. So I liked the chapter. I learned a lot about analytics, and I think we came across in a fair way on what really is going on in the league with respect. Some teams are crazy with it, and some are handling it really well. So I think it's a combination of the scouts accepting, the analytics people working with the scouts, and I think you can have a really good fit there.
Well, I was going to say, I don't want to spoil the book. That's why we want people to buy it. But I guess you just kind of just said, I was going to ask you where you are on analytics. You're kind of telling me you're in the middle. That's where I am, too. I think there's a place for them. I find them interesting, but I would never run my team by them.
It is interesting. There's some really good people. What I'm finding is the teams that the personality of the analytics person is really important. It's, in other words, a guy that can work with the group and work as a team player in the organization. I talked to one team, at the draft table, and the analytics guy is pouting at the table because they didn't take the guy he was pushing. And the GM said to the analytics guy, listen, buddy, let me tell you something. As long as I'm here, you will never be a key decision maker. We like your information. We'll use your information. But don't think you're a decision maker here. I loved Madden, the baseball manager, his comments on analytics. He said, and we quoted him in the book, he said, look, I want to know what time it is. I don't want to know how the watch was built. Give me the information. I don't want you in my clubhouse. I don't want you in the dugout, but I like your information. So, you know what? I think it's a real mix. Another guy said to me, Doug, it's like going out to dinner. It's not the steak. It's not the potatoes. It's not the salad, but it might be the salt and pepper you put on the meal. So I think but I think it's becoming as more data is available and more information is available, I think it can be put to good use. I really do. And I think you have to be fair to it. And if I was a GM today, I would certainly, when I'm looking to acquire a player or trade for a player or draft a player, I'm certainly looking at the data. There's no doubt I would be doing that. But I still want my scout's eyes on the player.
Sure. Well, I was just on a podcast as a guest last night, and the guy said, Rod, how do you feel about the numbers showing NCAA hockey's putting more players are being drafted than Major Junior is? And I said, are you trying to start a brawl? I was 20 years in the Western Hockey League. I very clearly have a stance on that. And I said, well, I'll just say I still think the best players are coming from Major Junior. I don't care what the numbers are. Look who all the number one overall picks are. I'm sorry. But how would you answer that? That more players are being drafted from NCAA? Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, the U.S. Hockey League, the USHL, has become a good league. There's no denying that, because let's not kid ourselves. They've got a huge base to pick from in the USHL. They've got a European draft now that's added to the league. It's become an older league where young kids are having a hard time making the league. It's a good league. To me, the USHL moves players to the NCAA typically after they're drafted. They go to a college program. So they come out of college, but really were drafted probably out of the USHL or early in their NCAA career. The US kids, if they choose that route to go USHL, then the NCAA, they get a longer window. For instance, if an 18-year-old, 19-year-old from the major junior goes to an NHL camp, I mean, it's a challenge. They're young kids, and an NCAA kid is coming out at 22 years of age. Big difference. And so they have a longer runway to develop their pro skills. But, major, junior, I mean, look, I watched Bedard the other night. Like, oh, my God. I mean, I watched Sidney Crosby. I watched Connor McDavid. I watched, the best of the best in the world. A lot of major junior guys there. Braden Point. I talked to Brent Sutter about Braden Point. And coached against him 6 times this year. Or coached against Bedard 6 times. And he really compared Bedard to like a Braden Point, who was a 3rd-round pick at a major junior by the Tampa Bay Lightning. And he's become a franchise player, Braden Point. So lots of great major junior players, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate the answer. And the parents are sitting there just riddled with anxiety, which road to send their kids down. And there's pluses and negatives to both. Let's be honest. Way too early prediction for a Stanley Cup final. I won't hold you to it, but who can you see making it to the end?
It really is. I'd love to see Edmonton get there with McDavid. I wore their goaltender, but I think, I was looking at Connor Brown moves in there. I mean, they've can the goaltending hold up? I thought they should have beat Vegas last year in that final, in that round, and I think they're capable of moving forward. So I've got Edmonton coming out of the West. The East is unbelievable. I'm telling you, Boston looks like they could drop off. Tampa looked like they could drop off. Toronto is going to be good, but I'm not in love with their defense, and I'm not in love with their goaltending. So, and their kids still haven't proven they can play when it really matters. I tell you, Florida has a chance to take a step, but I'm going Carolina, Edmonton, Stanley Cup final.
Wow. A rematch of 2006. I love it. And hey, it's interesting you say that. And I've been around all these ex-Leaf guys the last 2 summers. Jamie McCowan, Lanny McDonald, Tim Hunter, and they all talk about the media in Toronto and that it affects the Leafs' performance. You were clearly part of the problem, if you believe that. Do you believe that the media affects on-ice performance of the Toronto Maple Leafs?
I really tried to be part of the problem. I did try, but I'm not sure I had that much an impact. And when Babcock left or got fired, he phoned me and he said, "Hey, I really love listening to you every day." And I'm like, "Okay, right, So you know what? We were hard on the Leafs, but I thought we were always fair to the Leafs. And if the truth was known, if the Leafs would have listened to Kyprios and I a lot more, they probably would be ahead of where they are today. So we were trying to help them,
No kidding. I love the joke of an answer, but they I feel like they actually believe the media impacts what's going on there. And I often say, from my football career, I said, the second, if you're going to give me a ring when you win the championship, then I'll take the blame when you lose. Which, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's just an excuse.
I'll tell you what, I was a general manager in Columbus, and the media was tough there. I watch what goes on in Vancouver, what goes on in Winnipeg, what goes on in Calgary, Edmonton. The media are tough there, too. Let's not kid ourselves. I don't think the Leafs get it any worse than any other Canadian city, because every Canadian city, they love the game. The fan base is passionate. They're all tough on them, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
Suck it up. Don't use it as an excuse.
It's how I feel, too, so I'm glad that we're singing from the same hymn book. Doug, thanks for this.
I got to tell you something.
Yep.
The media guy in Columbus, who I didn't get along with very well at the end, he made a comment about a couple of years ago. He said, Doug MacLean, the general manager, would hate Doug MacLean, the media guy. Pretty accurate.
And you were okay with that?
I thought it was pretty accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Doug, thanks for the time. We'll see you when you get down here.
Okay, man. All the best. Take care. Thanks for having me.
The great Doug MacLean. You bet. Thanks for coming on. Former Panthers and Blue Jackets head coach.